Hello and welcome to the AFP webinar, Raise the Money of Your Dreams with Donor-Centered Major Gift Fundraising. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ronnie and I'll be the operator for today's event. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acquaint you with a few features of this web event technology. At any time, you may adjust your audio using any computer volume settings that you may have. If you look on the right-hand side of your screen, you will see the Q&A window. There is a large window which holds all of your sent messages and a smaller text box at the bottom where you'll type in your questions. To send a question, click in the text box and type your text. When finished, click the send button. All questions that you submit are only seen by today's presenter. Your questions will be responded in the order in which they were received and will be addressed at the end of the presentation. At the conclusion of today's program, we ask that you complete a brief post-event survey. Please take a moment to complete this survey as it will help AFP plan future web events. Our presenter today is Gail Perry. Gail is a U.S.-based fundraising speaker, trainer, consultant, and all-around rabble-rouser. I believe that fundraising is not about money, it's about changing the world. In 30 years of major gift and capital campaign fundraising, she has helped hundreds of nonprofits around the world set up successful major gift programs and raise large gifts. Her donor-centered approach to major gift conversations is less about the ask and more about fulfilling the major donor's wishes and passions. Gail is the founder of Gail Perry Associates Consultants and the digital training site firedupfundraising.com. She was named number 10 in the list of the top fundraising experts in America by Philanthropy Media, and her firedupfundraising.com site is consistently ranked among the top nonprofit blogs by topnonprofits.com. She's the author of Fired Up Fundraising, Turn Your Board's Passion into Action, recognized as the gold standard guide to building successful fundraising boards. Gail speaks at keynote conferences internationally, and her Facebook Live broadcasts are an industry favorite. Now we'll turn it over to you, Gail.
Okay, how's everybody doing today? I'd love it if you would just type into the question box and say hello to me and tell me where you are in your organization. I like to do these webinars pretty casually, so I'd love to hear from everybody who's joining us. And here's a little bit more about me. Something funny about me is that I've served on a lot of boards, and one of the things I like to talk about is board members. And I wrote a book once upon a time, and I don't think I'll ever do another one. But you can find a lot of my stuff on my blog at Fired Up Fundraising. But then we've got our friends in Calgary, Alberta, and Juliet from the Children's Association says hi, and Sue Jacobs in Maryland, and we've got the Civil War Trust. David, hi. Wonderful. Thank y'all so much for saying hello. And I think we see Vivian Smith, one of our AFP leaders, with us, and Wendy from Seattle. Just so glad to have you here. And just feel free to share comments and questions as we go. But I want to ask you a really important question before we start, and this sort of sets the scene for our conversation today. And I want to know, usually the staff has an idea of how much money is really out there for them if they had the resources and the time to go after it. So how much money do you think might be out there for your nonprofit, but you don't really have the time, the resources, or the structure to go after it? I would love to know. And just think about this. This number is important. And let me explain why I'm asking you this question. Because if you have an idea, like Yara says about $20 million and Mindy says no clue, but if you have an idea that there are millions of dollars for your nonprofit out there, and here you are spending all your time in fundraising events and meetings and committees and letters and blah, blah, even giving days, and you are spending your time in less profitable and less productive places. So I want to make the case that major gift is going to save you. You know, major gifts will get you off the fundraising treadmill. Major gifts is the one fundraising strategy that is the most profitable, is the most highly productive place to spend your time and energy and resources, and it also brings in the kind of funding that your organization needs so badly. So you yourself are an investment. From your organization is investing in your skill set and your time. So it's important for you to be strategic about how you use your own resource that of yourself and your energy and your time. So please let me make an urgent plea to focus on major gifts for 2018. Especially, there's so many nonprofits that are, especially in the U.S., that are looking at tremendous cuts in government funding. The federal government is cutting community block grants that fund a lot of social safety net programs. So if you are looking at decreased United Way funding or dramatically cut back government funding, which everyone does fear, major gifts will save you. Major gifts will save you. Janice says she's got up to $1 million out there, and Elizabeth says around $20 million. That's a lot of money on the table. So let's focus. And so let's talk about major gifts. One of the things, I'm going to do several things today. I want to introduce you to an easier and more fun and much more successful way to raise big money. And I want to present sort of my donor-centered major gift approach. It's this approach, I've been working on it all of last year, and I've been listening to a lot of the famous and smartest major gift people, and I've sort of assimilated what everybody's saying, and I'm going to present to you sort of new content. These are my top 10 favorite donor questions that set up a lovely, seamless, pleasant donor conversation that can literally lead to putting an ask on the table. So that, I think you'll really enjoy these questions. I also have a handout for you. We just got my artist to design this cool PDF with those questions. So if you, it should be, I think it's on the handout, so I'm not sure because we just got it today. Send me an email at gp@gailperry.com, and I'd love to share it with you. But also, not only are we going to talk about donor conversations, but we're going to talk about the tools and the structure that you need to ramp up major gifts for your nonprofit, because I will say to you that without structure, you do not have a major gift program at all. And we're going to, we're going to share major gift prospecting strategies, some of my favorite ones, and how to get out of the office, some of my favorite ones. And so I really do think that this donor-centered major gift approach is so much easier and kinder and gentler because you are taking the lead from the donor. And the donor literally feels like she's in charge of the conversation, and the donor enjoys all these conversations. And one of the things we struggle with is how do we develop a relationship? How do we get our donors to like us enough to want to see us? How can we get them to accept appointments? But if they are enjoying their conversations with you and they're getting deeper and deeper involved, it will become a priority in their life. So we're going to talk about my favorite prospecting strategies and my favorite power questions that your donors will love. We're going to talk about structure and how to get out of the office. So let's talk about my favorite prospecting strategies. I was thinking about this just today because I'm doing a Facebook Live broadcast later today about how to get the first, second, and third appointment with a donor. And, I think there are two kinds of donors, perhaps. This is a great oversimplification. But maybe one type of donor is very busy, like I am. I'd love to donate, but I'm hopelessly busy all over. And so my time is hard to get my attention. It's hard to get time with me. The only way you can ever get time with me is to make it fun, really, and to make it social or to ask my advice. And then there's another group of donors who are retired, and they may be older, and they are looking for interesting things to think about and things to do with their time. And I'm willing to bet that most of your major donors are in the older category. So consider your donor profile when you're trying to figure out how to approach a donor and who your donors might be. But I want to introduce, we have our favorite vocabulary words in fundraising, and one of them is, the whole art of qualifying prospects is so very important. And qualifying is a sales term, actually, and it means that three things. It means three things: that your prospective donor has financial capacity. Number two is that she's actually interested in your cause. And number 3, there is some way that you can cultivate him or her for a gift. For example, you may have somebody who has capacities, very interested, but they live across the world. It's very difficult to cultivate them. So I would not say they're as highly qualified as somebody who lives down the street in your community who has capacity, very interested, and because they can be cultivated. But qualifying prospects is an art. It requires very pointed questions, and these 10 questions, power questions I'm going to share with you, help you determine whether a prospect is qualified. And I'd also suggest that every single time you connect with a prospect, you are qualifying them again and again and again. Do we still want to be focusing on these people, or should we let them go? So let me share with you my top favorite places to look. I mean, clearly everybody says you look internally first, right? You look internally first, and you can run go to your donor files, run your reports. You know, who are your major donors? I would look, quite frankly, at major donors right now. I would look at mid-level donors, and I would look at some of the smaller donors whose profile is showing like they are active and they give a lot. If you've got a smaller donor who's active and maybe somebody's giving monthly, you know that they're really committed to your cause. So your most likely prospects, quite frankly, are inside your donor files. And I would say that maybe sometimes they are sleeping inside your donor files, which is why you need to be spending some time, money, and resources on data and getting the reporting out of your system. Everybody tells me they've got these great systems, but they're not pulling the data out of it. And I frankly, I think that the new big data kind of analytics that we can access now from our databases is really fabulous, because you can now pull reports that combine, let's see if I can get this right, they combine the donors, what they call transactional history, the donors' financial and transactional history, with their involvement and activity history. And whammo, if you have a very large file, you can do analysis on these two criteria and bring up a whole new set of people who seem to have capacity and who are deeply committed. So Penelope Burke once said, and I never forgot this sentence, she said that every organization has all the major gifts they need, but unfortunately they are sleeping inside your donor files. And so one of my friends in fundraising here in North Carolina, Catherine Gamble, was the head fundraiser for the a $50 million campaign at the North Carolina Museum of Art, and she said she was a member of the Dorothy School of Fundraising. That's why we have red sparkly shoes, everybody. The Dorothy School of Fundraising is that there's no place like home to look for your major donor prospects, no place like home. Catherine ran a $50 million campaign, and she said that 85% of their prospects were already donors, but they were giving small. Isn't that interesting? 85% were giving small. And you know, when you have I started my fundraising career at Duke University, and one of these great mottos that my mentor drilled into my head at Duke was that you make the first gift from somebody who is a major donor prospect, you make the gift such a nice experience. You make it an occasion, as my friend said, you make it an occasion of joy and celebration on the part of the organization and the donor. So if you've got a major donor, who's got a major donor who's undergiven? You know, you've given that you've asked for something and they've given a fraction of it, and we're all so disappointed, right? I remember those days. But why not consider that this is an occasion of joy and celebration to make the donor feel so happy that they've given, and so enjoying their relationship with your organization, right? So consider how you can make the gifts that your current donors are giving the people who are prospective major gift prospects. How can you make that such a wonderful experience for them? And so here we are. You have some prospective major donors that you have identified in your files, right? There may be somebody who suddenly sent you a $1,000 check. Bingo. What do? You get on the telephone. And one of the great arts of major gift fundraising, which is not complicated, even though it can be a little scary, is how do you qualify donors on the telephone, right? you qualify them to see whether they're worth your spending time to go have a meeting. And this lovely lady with a corded phone represents an older lady, and we know for a fact that Chronicle of Philanthropy did a profile on the major donors of 2014. I wish they'd do it again for this past year. But the major donors of 2014, the number one age group was 80 to 84 years old. 80 to 84 years old were the people who made the largest gifts to nonprofits in that year. And we also know that women give more, give larger gifts, and give more often than men. So I encourage you to be thinking about who might be the ladies, the older ladies who may even be a little bit lonely and who would welcome contact with you that are sleeping inside your donor files. When I do a workshop, lots of times I'll put people in small groups and say, can you make a list of the older ladies that you may be overlooking because they're not as obvious as the big corporate chief financial officer. But so how do you do this telephone qualification? Ellie Georgefall, my friend, who is the fundraiser at Lineberger Cancer Center here at UNC Chapel Hill, who we hope is joining me on Facebook Live this afternoon at 3. So tune in again if you're interested in this afternoon at 3. We're going to talk about how to get those appointments. But she has these lovely, lovely phrases that she uses, and this comes from a presentation she made at AFP International called Mastering the Art of the Discovery Telephone Call. And we all talk about wealth indicators, capacity. And Ellie always asks people, how did you come to be a donor? And how did you come to be involved with our organization? And the question, do you plan to travel this summer, is a wealth indicator question, because if the donor says, we're going to take the RV down to the Gulf or something, they may probably not be a prospect. But if they say they're working on their next round the world cruise, that this donor has capacity. And I'm here in North Carolina, and Ellie also raises money in North Carolina. And you may be in an area where there's a lot of land, and there are a lot of people who all that land that you see, somebody is making money off all that land. And often, or not often, but several times in my career, men have said, "Oh, I'm just an old country boy. You don't have to come see me." And you know what? That's a dead ringer for $1 million prospect. Dead ringer. Because Ellie ran into it once, and I ran into it, and we just had the biggest laugh in the world. So let's talk about my other favorite prospecting strategy. So remember, my first prospecting strategy is do your data analytics in any way you can on your own files, and then try to qualify people over the telephone, right? And I'm a great fan of door opener events hosted by board members and also other donors. I think we forget, our board members are often terrified of fundraising. Somebody used that word with me this year, and I've mulled and mulled over the use of the word terrified, but I guess, and she was dead serious, but donors have in donor surveys often expressed that they are willing to try to bring other donors into the organization, and they may be far more enthusiastic about getting their friends together and, sharing why they care about your organization. This is a porch party. I love to have porch parties, and my porch in Raleigh, where I used to live, had this lovely front porch, and I'm working on one in my new house in Chapel Hill here. This is actually a political event. My friend Cynthia in the White was running for office in North Carolina legislature, and so I hosted a fundraiser, and we were doing meeting and greeting. But this is the same kind of event and energy that you should be able to produce ideally for door opening, because I'll tell you right now, I'll go down on record as saying that I really hate to try to pick up the telephone and call people and ask them for an appointment. And I will probably do just about anything but that if I can, because I think donors want to eyeball you first. So I like to try to go to events that I think that that they may be attending. And I really, really appreciate it when board members and other donors will do a small VIP event. I think that the art of the donor cultivation event can be a lost art, it needs to be studied more carefully, and we need to develop a lot more best practices. Once I'll tell you real briefly, I had a porch party for the Carolina Ballet when I was a board member of the ballet. And as a board member, I invited a number of people that I thought would be able to be helpful to the ballet, and we had a new artistic director, and so ostensibly the porch party was to introduce the new artistic director. And I invited 60 people by email, very casually, because people have asked me how I extended the invitation. And then 30 people came. And we were all on my porch, just this exact porch right here. And I identified a few people for the fundraising staff to focus on. And presto, we developed some really wonderful relationships with people who ended up becoming major donors just because I had this fun little porch party. So I encourage you to consider that as an idea. I think the porch party works because it feels casual. And all my friends in the cold north, you can have a fireside party or a barbecue party or something that feels casual. I think people really love to feel casual. And then you remember I mentioned earlier about going to events where donors will be. That's why your gala is really helpful for you in prospecting if you can get your major donors there, because it's a great place to chat them up. And you may say, I don't have a budget to go to the community events, but you know something? I volunteer for our city arts festival, Artsplosure, and downtown Raleigh, and I see all sorts of important people who come by. I usually pump beer every year on Sunday afternoon when it closes up. I'm out there at the beer tent pumping, and it's just a fun thing to do that I've made sort of a tradition. But chambers of commerce have events that are not expensive. But if you are focusing in on a major donor, you can easily find out where they go. In fact, in Raleigh, there's a coffee shop where one of the top philanthropists of our entire region has coffee with his wife on Tuesday mornings at 9 o'clock. So you can hover, right, and chat him up when you have a chance. And Brian says from the frozen north, yeah, they have fireside events. Fireside is right, yeah. So community events, see if you can meet your donor in other ways and introduce yourself. That is my favorite way, quite frankly, to get in front of my prospects and to start qualifying them. And Amanda wanted more questions for qualifying prospects. Amanda, my 10 donor questions that we're going to review in just a second are the most wonderful ways to qualify your prospects. So let me speak briefly about screening sessions. Screening sessions, of course, are when you put together a list of donors and you take the list to someone else and ask them to review the list with you. But there's a lot to know about screening sessions. There are two kinds of screening sessions. One is one-on-one, like we see here, and then the other kind is with a group. And I want to warn you that asking somebody to a screening session can be awkward. And you need to be very sensitive to the way you present it. You do not want to say, may I please have an appointment with you to do priority prospect screening, because that does not sound like any fun. But on the other hand, you can say, would you mind brainstorming with me about some possible donors to our organization? Would you mind brainstorming with me about possible donors? And I think that is gentle. And it's polite. In the South, American South, we like to have beautiful manners. And you can go far if you can pick the brain of other people. And I want to tell you why I like screening sessions the most in terms of qualifying and identifying potential major donors is because the scuttlebutt in the community is real. You can find out from other people what's going on with your donor. What is their divorce? Is there illness? Is there joy? Is there a move? Is there a vacation? Is there estate planning? Is a business being about to be sold? All of this information is freely available to you in your community, and that's why it's so important for you to be out and about. I sort of like to, I play sleuth. I'm so curious. I like to play detective, and I'm always looking. Oh gosh, would they be a great donor to my organization? I need to invite them to the next event. Blah blah blah. So consider that word of mouth is a very powerful tool. I've written a couple of blog posts about that. You can find on Fired Up Fundraising if you want some more resources on it. I wrote a couple of summers ago about small donor VIP events and screening sessions. That if you go to the Fired Up Fundraising site, you can pull down the little the search box on the upper right, and you can just type in some words and phrases and pull out an article or two that can go further into detail on some of the concepts I'm presenting. And Mindy said, what kind of people would you like to invite to a screening? I would invite, you have to be careful. I like to invite people who can be savvy about major gift fundraising and savvy about the money in the community. Some people are really offended by this kind of conversation. They find it to be intrusive and awkward and inappropriate. And so you have to approach people with delicacy and discretion and sensitivity, and not just barge around saying you want to talk about other people's money over lunch, because that's not appropriate. So try to figure out. Lots of times board members are great to do this kind of work with you. And then my last prospect ID approach I want to share with you is screening, wealth screening. Lots of people are doing wealth screening these days, lots of people, and I highly approve of wealth screening. However, my friends, it gives you a lot of data. And so the biggest challenge with the wealth screening is there's an overwhelm of data. So I almost like the ones where you can look up somebody online by typing in their name. You have a subscription and you can look them up. But the wealth screening data has got to be verified, right? Everybody who's gotten wealth screening, you've got to verify the information because it may not be correct. So wealth screening is a hint, it's a guide, but it's certainly not the be-all and end-all. And so let's move on into my favorite 10 questions. But I just want to warn you, it takes a bit of time to close a major gift, right? It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, and we go through this process. We just talked about identifying, and quite frankly, the qualification process happens all the time, all the way through. Some people say once you identify, then you qualify. Yes, you do, and then you qualify. Do we want to invest more time and energy with this person or not? And I'm going to show you how to cultivate and involve these people, and make it fun for them. And when they are ready, you ask for support, and then you go into deep stewardship. And, of course, we all know that the stewardship, the thank you, the acknowledgement, the engagement, the post-gift donor experience sets up the next ask. So you use the post-gift experience to be an occasion of joy and celebration. So you go directly back into the asking cycle because remember, the first gift is never the largest, and your major donors will make a succession of gifts because you want to keep a long-term relationship with these lovely people, right? Lovely people. So let's talk about the power questions that your donors will love. And I see we've got a number of people here, and if you have any questions, just let me know. I see Amy Hughes. Are you my cousin Amy Hughes, or are you a different Amy Hughes? I'm curious to know. Let's look at these power questions and what they are all about. They are conversation starters and conversation topics. That these are questions you ask the donor and you listen. My favorite new book, or this is an old book, and I'm going to put this on the screen. I have this slide. You might want to print this out and stick it on your wall. I have this slide at the end of our presentation as well. And also you can download the handout that discusses a little bit more about each of these questions. But let me speak a minute on the art and beauty of listening. And I have a book here I'm looking at in my office called Power Listening, Mastering the Most Critical Business Skill of All by Mr. Bernard T. Ferrari. And I don't know if he was a car dealer or not, but he said that listening is a lost art, and you will find out everything you need to know. And he talks about key listening techniques, and you observe your person and you listen to their tone and their body language, and you watch them, and because it can make the difference between success or failure in your fundraising, right? Success or failure. So consider your listening skills to be one of the greatest communications and major gift fundraising skills that you want to develop. And one more point is that nobody listens anymore anyway. Everybody's so busy, and you honor your donor. You honor your donor to when you listen and you ask these important questions. And so Lisa says the handouts download, but she can't see them to print. I don't know how to help you with that. Maybe our webinar people can. Danielle, I'm going to take your question about this fundraising event at the end, because it's not quite on this topic, but I have a lot to say about fundraising events. So let's talk about power question number 1. What inspired your gift? I would suggest that the very first question you ever want to know is, why is the donor giving? And we are looking at donor surveys as a tool for pulling out this information, and whatever we can do to find out what the donor's motivations are, what their interests are. And let me say a little bit more about this, because I feel pretty strongly about it. I was a frustrated ballet dancer, yes, once upon a time. And I have always volunteered and served as a board member for ballet companies and ballet studios or dance companies. And I love dance, and it was just transformational for me as a kid. And I could go on and on right now. And you know something, for all of the work, the money I've given, the gifts I've made, and everything, nobody has ever asked me in my role as a donor or a volunteer or board member why I cared about dance. And I have a story, and I would love to share my story, because it just brings back all this joy. I mean, one time at the Carolina Ballet during the Nutcracker, they invited my daughters and me backstage during the Nutcracker. And, you might think I'm bonkers, but I just thought it was the most amazing experience in the world. I saw the Sugar Plum Fairy warming up, and my daughters did the thumbs up to some of the little soldiers. It was an experience that happened 15 years ago or more, and I still remember it with joy. So if you can hear the emotion in my voice, okay, your donor has a story just like that is full of emotion and joy. So if you can ask your donor to tell his or her story to you, then when they share their story, just like I sort of gave you a mini version of my personal story, it made me happy. And they will associate you with happiness and joy. So one of the ways you use this question to qualify donors is to determine why they're giving, of course, and how passionate they are. Because how passionate they are clearly determines whether or not they're strong major gift prospects or not, right? And it also gives you a window into their personality profile too. Are they deeply emotional like I am, or are they very analytical? That they made the gift to your organization because they looked you up online and you had a very low overhead ratio. God help me. And they want so these two questions are so fundamental. And they are so seldom used in major gift fundraising, at least in my experience. And briefly, there was a cover article in the Chronicle of Philanthropy quite a few years ago about this famous New York City fundraiser named Naomi Levine, and she talked about all these major donor relationships that she'd had over the years, and she said you need to be an interesting enough person for the donor to want to have lunch with you. Interesting enough person that your donor wants to have lunch with you, and she said that you need to read a lot and be well informed so you can ask good questions. So I think that asking a donor their story is the best possible way to do telephone qualification. Remember the older lady on the phone. Donors will like you more and more and more if you let them do the talking. And so the concept of who does the talking is worth mulling over, because we are so programmed to think that we're supposed to present and that we're supposed to sell and we're supposed to have a pitch. And donor-centered major gift fundraising in the 21st century does the reverse. It lets the donor, you draw the donor along this happy little path. Because if you've seen me present before, I love talking about the kiss of death to fundraisers, which is to be boring, right? To be boring. And the number one way to be boring is to talk too much. So, one of my major fundraisers when I was one of my major mottos when I was a frontline fundraiser at Chapel Hill, I was the head fundraiser for the business school, was when in doubt, shut up. When you're not sure what to say, shut up and let the donor will fill the void. So, it's okay. And then power question number 3, isn't this interesting? This is not very powerful, but it is beautiful. And then what happened? Tell me more. I mean, if you got me rolling on my ballet story and I went to 2 versions of it and then I had something else to say, I'm polite, like I would probably not dump this entire stuff on you unless you were smiling and nodding and said, and then what happened? So this is the way to bring joy in your donor's heart, by letting them tell the story and discreetly urging them on. People say, what am I supposed to do with a donor who doesn't want to talk to me? Well, if your donor doesn't want to talk to you and you're asking all these questions, you may need to bless and release this lovely person and find somebody who does want to have a relationship with you. I mean, we do know that only maybe 1 out of every 3 or 4 major donor prospects wants to personally engage with you. So be careful about your expectations and don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. And so I love to do these little infographics, ask questions to learn more about your donor's interest and motivation to give. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're asking questions to qualify them and find out more. And my 4th power question is one of my favorite golden keys to donors' hearts and minds and their wallets or credit cards is, what are your impressions? I have raised so much money using what are your impressions, and it's sort of like it's this general open-ended question. It's sort of like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what you're going to get. And your donor may be ticked off at you. Your donor may be happy. Your donor may say that your thank you note was addressed to my husband or wife and I made the gift. Your donor may say, it's cold in this building every time I come over here and it makes me so uncomfortable. I mean, you don't know what's at the top of your donor's mind, and so asking sort of what are their impressions of your blah, blah, or just in general, what are your impressions, is a lovely way to elicit the top thing on their list for you. So I have lots of stories about what are your impressions that I'm not going to bore you with today. But just know that it is amazingly powerful. I mean, it's also sort of like, one board member says to another board member, tell me about your interest in such and such. Tell me, what are your impressions of our organization? It's probing. It's probing. Franca wanted to know the book for listening. It's called Power Listening by Bernard Ferrari, like the car, and it's been on my shelf quite a long time. But in preparation for this webinar today, I was picked it up because I've been thinking a lot about listening as a business skill, as a major gift fundraising skill. It was published by Penguin. I'm looking for the date here. If we had a video, I'd show it to you on the phone. And Elizabeth, this is interesting. Elizabeth says that she works for a domestic violence shelter, and the reasons people give are not from happy memories. But something, people have very urgent, there's a lot of talk about rage donations right now. And if I were giving to domestic violence a shelter for reasons that I have experienced this in my own life or seen close at hand, I would be extremely motivated. And I may or may not have a story, but you can at least open the door for the donor to share ever so gently. So again, remember the words I said earlier: discretion, sensitivity, compassion. All of these emotional intelligence decisions play into your major gift fundraising relationships with donors. And how about this one? Now we're moving a little bit closer. We found out their impressions. We found out why they gave. Come right out and ask. Could you see yourself becoming more involved with our organization? And I looked at these two ladies in this picture, and they both look almost maybe mother and daughter. I don't know, these ponytails. But maybe they want to get involved together, or one's the fundraiser and one's the board member or a donor. You need to be able to say out loud this question, and if you can't say out loud this question, you may not be the best prospect for a major gift fundraiser, because our fatal flaw, all of us fundraisers, is that we go into the social realm and we are afraid to ask pointed questions like this. But if you've already been talking about the donor's interest, and they're here I'm blathering on about the Carolina Ballet and my history as a young girl as a dancer, it would be a natural thing for you to ask me if I could see myself getting more involved. And by the way, Kent Stroman, there you see his name on the screen, he has this fabulous book called Conversational Asking that I just love. And he did a webinar for me this past year, and all my people are still talking about it. They're still talking about it. And one of his questions is, how did you come to be so generous? And what does this question tell you? This question tells you about the donor's philanthropy, right? And so I shared this with Diane Fuller. I was helping her, and and she walked out with a $5,000 gift. Asking this question, you will find out, is there anybody else engaged in your donor's philanthropy? What is their philanthropic vision? What are their interests? Who impacts their decisions? How do they make their gifts? Do they have a donor advised fund? This might be the $64,000 question for 2018, so we can find out if they have a donor advised fund, so that we can cultivate them from that angle. And all right, now we're getting closer. We're getting closer to an asking conversation. What part of our work most interests you? This should be an easy question for you to ask. What part of our work most interests you? Because this is where you start finding out your donor's passions and interests and hot buttons, right? Passions and interests and hot buttons. And their donor will tell you what she's interested in. Your donor has an idea. She may be interested in finances. She may be interested in the mothers, the kids, the daddies, the families, the social safety net, the community. You don't know. Your case for support has lots of legs, and your donor is interested in one specific aspect of it. And you've got to find this out. You've got to find out their passions and interests if you're going to cultivate them for a major gift. And so your homework, perhaps, should be, take your list of top 20 donors and analyze what are they passionate about, And then number 8, asking for advice. I'm really big on the advice visit. And again, I've raised a lot of money on the advice visit. You can ask things like, can I pick your brain? Or what do you think? Or I'd love your opinion. This is, by the way, everybody, this is my favorite way to get in the door. My favorite way to get in the door. And my friend Linda Frenette, I was sort of mentoring her for a long time. She had an advice visit with a lady in Raleigh, and she walked out with $10,000 without asking, And then Indra from the Animal Sanctuary outside of New York City, she walked out with a $1.5 million challenge grant when she asked his advice and input. So I think I could do a whole webinar on how to use the advice visit as a fundraising tool, because one of the reasons I like advice visits is that you honor your donor. You honor your donor by asking for more than money. Your donor does not want to be treated like an ATM. If your donors say to you, we're not ATMs, then you are way too much about the money, and you need to be more about them and their interests, right? Them and their interests. Don't get stuck in overanalyzing, but instead move forward like this. And so here is where we're we're opening the door to the asking conversation. And again, you've got to be able to ask these very blunt questions. You've got to be able to ask them, if you made a gift, what would you like to accomplish? Because, my favorite charities that I give to, I play around in my dreams sometimes with thinking, well, if I could really make like a $500,000 gift, what would I do with that money for my organization? Where would I want to focus it? And so if you have found out your donors' passions and interests and hot buttons, and you are developing cultivation experiences for them to learn more about their passions and interests. For example, I'm here at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and if I could be interested in the Institute for Arts and Humanities, and they have an adult education program on the Civil War that's just opening up soon, and some of my friends are taking Civil War history, which is interesting to all of us Southerners. And as a fundraiser, you can who are our major donor prospects who are taking the Civil War class? Okay, well, maybe they might like to have lunch with the Civil War expert on the faculty. What you do is that you find out their passions and hot buttons, and then you design cultivation experiences for them uniquely to dive further down into their area of interest. And then they will start thinking about what they might like to accomplish with their money. And this is a key question that every major gift fundraiser ought to be asked. And Mindy wants to know, are these questions written in the order? Sort of. I wouldn't ask all the questions in one meeting unless this is the only meeting you're ever going to have with this donor. If you only have one meeting ever, and sometimes you have this opportunity to make a presentation, and that's a different kind of thing. I would start with why are you interested, why did you see us, and then I would engage the person in a conversation about the opportunity that you're presenting to them today. Remember, my good Australian friends at Exponential, Craig Gravenstein and Brian Holmes, they're the top major gift experts in Australia, or among the group. They said to me once that major gift fundraising is about developing the relationship, and capital campaigns are about the ask. And so major gift fundraising is preparing the donor to the ask. And yes, we get to the ask as well, but we are more focused on the relationship so that when it comes time for the very, very, very large ask, they are primed and ready. So this is my favorite question when I am thinking about a polite, lovely, donor-centered way to this is sort of puts the ask on the table, right? Because they know that I'm wild about dance, right? I'm bonkers. I'm one of these few bonkers people, and they've engaged me in. They find out my passions and interests. I'm not interested in the tutus or the toe shoes. I'm interested in modern choreography. And I start talking about Lynn Taylor Corbett, and she comes down and she sets dances on the Carolina Ballet, and my God, I just think she's so cool. They're my favorite dances. Okay, so there is my passion and interest. Bingo. And if they really, I hope nobody from the Carolina Ballet is listening, but they could arrange for me to meet Lynn Taylor Corbett when she's down here, and I would, and if I were a person of great capacity, which I'm not, and then they would say, would you like to know more about how you can impact this project? So you can see how this conversation can be used in a very seamless way. And, of course, I would say yes. And, maybe I'm a philanthropist. Maybe I have a donor advised fund, and they're letting me have this joyful experience, learning more about something that just rings my bell. So know that these questions really do work as long as you're careful about observing your prospect and your donor and being sensitive to them. Be ready to back off if things go wrong. Remember your ethics, that you want to protect confidentiality at all times. Kathleen says, how often a year do you meet with major donors? Kathleen, when I was at Duke, they said once you meet somebody who has potential for $100,000, if you meet with them once a month or engage them deeply somehow once a month at the end of the year, you'll be able to ask them for a gift successfully. And I don't know if you really have to do it that often, but if somebody is in your short list and, you find ways to engage with them because they're on a committee, they're volunteering, they're attending performances, or they're engaged somehow in your organization. That's the key, I think, to really being able to be in front of them often. And so let me put these questions back up. And I'd love your feedback because, I'm still developing this content. And is it okay for me to call it donor-centered? I think it is because it's just so beautifully. I'd be interested in how you would describe these questions because they're donor-centered. They let the donor lead the way. I think they're very polite. I think they bring forth joy. I think they help you qualify. Who was the person who said right off the bat? What are the questions? These are the qualification questions. And the Australian group, Lisa Thornton wants to know about what the Australian group said. Exponential is their very cool name. Major Gifts is about developing the relationship, and capital campaigns are about an ask. Quite frankly, boom, boom, boom. Slightly different focus, right? But Major Gifts you have a major gift goal, you've got to have ask on the table, period. So Major Gifts, definitely, if you're looking at a capital campaign next year, you need to be all over your major gift processes, just like we're talking today, in order to be ready to do a campaign next year. So let me ask you a question. Let me ask for some feedback here. What's holding you back from raising big money? This is question now. What is your challenge? What is your biggest challenge in raising big money? How about sharing with me some of your perspective? I was just talking to somebody, Brenda Campbell with Make-A-Wish Secure Futures. They changed their name in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And she was saying that her biggest challenge all along had been making the time. And because she made the time last year, she said they raised $140,000 more than they had the previous year from their major donors, and they also have $200,000 on the plate that is pending to come in. And she said the key was allocating the time. And so Amanda says getting in front of people. Ann says finding where the prospects are in the community, and see if you can plug into the word of mouth. And you need more powerful people on your board who are plugged in. Getting the first appointment, Darcy said, yeah. And Oak Park says they're all competing with, I don't take donor fatigue and competing as true roadblocks. I'm going to say it right now, because if you're on fire and you really drill down and do your major gift fundraising correctly, you're going to be able to find a few people who really love you. I mean, in my major gift coaching last year, a lot of people started out with 200 prospects. They ended up working with 20 prospects. You can raise more with fewer money. You can raise more money with fewer prospects, hands down. Sylvia says so many other pressing and competing priorities. Sylvia, that's when you have to go to your fundraising strategy. What are we doing that is not productive? It's probably getting rid of that next event, right? And Elizabeth said getting out of the office. And Chris is trying to figure out how to find natural ways to cross paths with people. Well, I became a volunteer in my community. I volunteered in politics. I worked on the city council elections. I threw little fundraisers for them. And then I got appointed to city commissions, and all of a sudden I know the people in my community who are making key decisions. So it takes a little bit of your effort to be out and about in the community, but if you do, it will pay off. It will pay off. And I really appreciate Donna's working through a large portfolio. Good for you. Is 20 a good number of true qualified major donors to be working with at any one time? When I was a frontline major gift fundraiser, I had my top 10 and my next 20. And my top 10, I engaged deeply, or like a moves management program once a month. My next 20, I moved on every other month. And so it depends on you. It depends on the value of your prospect pool, and it depends on the amount of time that you have available to spend. Amount of time. So I just have a little bit more. I want to finish up on time. But look, remember I made a big pitch for structure. And how about this? Shall we get rid of fundraising as a dart game and shoot from the hip major gift fundraising and just making time when you can. How about some structure? How about a real live major gift program? A real live commitment. And if you do not have a major gift fundraising program unless you have three things, okay? 3 tools, and I am not kidding. One is you've got to have a prospect list. And I mean an up-to-date prospect list, a prospect list that is rated and has qualified people, and a prospect list that lives and breathes and that you revisit often. A lot of people, I have a prospect list, but it doesn't have ratings on it, and it's old. So your prospect list has got to live behind your left ear in the morning when you're brushing your teeth, right? It's alive. It's there. And the second thing is you've got to have a monthly team meeting. And I would say that if you don't have that monthly meeting, you don't have a major gift program, because you have got to come back in with a very small group of trusted people and review your prospect list and create some next steps. And you cannot do this alone. You've got to have other colleagues who are supportive. And then, how about a culture that supports major gift fundraising? How about a shared responsibility for fund development, that people embrace this whole idea and they're excited about it and they're going to do everything they can to make it happen, right? And so we all have the internal support for major gift fundraising may or may not be strong, but you've got to find some people who are willing to back you. Don't let yourself get stuck out hanging on a limb trying to do it by yourself, because when everybody gets behind fundraising, all is possible. And what I mean by supporting major gifts is, A, your organization is willing to honor donors as true partners and great assets, and everybody's engaged in thanking and making donors happy. And B, everybody respects and supports fundraising, right? They respect and support fundraising. I don't think that's too much to ask. So let me give you some tips to get out of the office before we close that all together, and I will take some questions. Number one, enlist all of the administrative and support team and your colleagues to help you get out of the office. Number two, set a goal every month. You're trying to have 10 appointments with major donors on top of all the other stuff that you're doing. And tell everybody in your office that, okay, I'm trying to get out 10 times, and ask for their help. Ask for their help to shoo you out of the office. They need to know what your goal is, because they may get jealous or engage in criticism of you because they think all you do is go have lunch. But the fact is, if you're trying to make those goals every month and you report back to the staff, I had 12 visits, I had 10 visits, I had 15 visits, then they will understand that this is a metric that you have to meet every month, just like they have to meet their metrics, right? It can be difficult because everybody says that the administrative staff or support team engages in backbiting and snide comments under their breath about major gift fundraisers. And I would say to you, if you are a manager, you need to stop that right now, because it is absolutely detrimental to your major gift success, and it is debilitating to a major gift fundraiser. So I would go to your boss and say, this really needs to stop. And so again, here is today's PowerPoint, and I would love to offer you a free workbook. I've just updated my workbook. It's like an ebook. And also our handout will be there, and some other articles that talk more from my blog that talk more about all the points that I've made in this program. So I'd like to know what your takeaways are. How about telling me your takeaways, and then I'll take some questions. So what idea did you get today that you want to you said you could use? Because I tend to overdo on the ideas. I apologize for that. But tell me what your takeaways are. What are your favorite ideas that you got out of today? And Yara says refining her prospect. She says she's already working on her prospect list right now. She pulled it back out. Good for you. Good for you. And Amanda said that she really liked the qualifying questions. Laura says setting monthly goals is going to be. And Elizabeth says getting out to major events in the community. And ask their board to be there and plus you, right? Dana says she really loved the questions and she printed off Darcy really liked the donor questions. Give me some feedback too. Send me an email at gp@gailperry.com, because I would love, I'm still developing this content. And by the way, here's my email address. That's my personal email address, and my office number, my Twitter handle. So welcome here. I love hearing from people, and I always respond. Brian liked make donors feel great about their gifts, whether you're disappointed or not. Yeah, and liked understanding the various interests of potential donors. And Krista's going to focus on the prospect list with those columns. Ruger likes power listening. Power listening, yeah, I think that's such a powerful idea. Krista likes the 10 questions, and Oak Park Yara says, listen more than you speak at meetings. Darcy loves the advice. And look, it is 2:01. We are bingo, finishing right on time. Love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's make 2018 a fabulous year. If you don't know me, you can sign up for my newsletter on my website, Fired Up Fundraising, and love to help you in any way I can. So let's see, the text number for the free workbook. Okay, excuse me, I will go back. Bingo, right here, 66866. Elizabeth says she's really grateful. It was very helpful. Ruger says, thank you for participating, and thank you for your input. And I love to make these interactive, because it's technology that can all help build a community. So take care and have a fabulous day, fabulous week, and fabulous 2018, and focus on those major gifts. Yay! Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you for attending today's webinar. Please also take a brief moment to complete our survey, which helps us program future events. Upon completion of the survey, you'll be able to download and print your certificate. For a complete list of upcoming webinars, please visit www.pathlms.com/AFP/events. This concludes today's program. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful day.